I came up with the idea for this video when I was driving during the Christmas holidays along the motorway, and I drive without the radio on, no music, nothing, and time flies when you do that. It's crazy, and I'm so grateful because it's one of those rare places, being confined in a car, you have to get somewhere, no other distractions, where my child who's sitting in the back, he can daydream at last. There's no other place like it. He's unaware that you can have like entertainment or screens. He's just never seen it, come across it, seen another child do it. So he just sits there and just accepts that he has to be bored for 6 hours there and back. And he's just does it. He just looks out the window and he daydreams, and so do I. Yeah, so do we. I guess a little when we drive on long journeys. I guess for the driver it's a little different because they have to sort of concentrate on the other cars. But yeah, this is where I got the whole idea for this video is gosh, it's good, so good to be bored. And many of us who live in the modern world don't allow ourselves to be bored. We resist boredom. And, if we speak about meditation, that's just a fancy term for allowing ourselves to be bored. And it's so rare. We even have to schedule in a time for meditation or go and meditate. Whereas actually we can just be bored anywhere. It doesn't have to be labelled as such or have a term or be on your list of things to do. It's actually the human sort of primary state of mind should be in those more imaginative, daydreaming, relaxed, peaceful states. But we've been conditioned since school to concentrate. I was a notorious daydreamer in school. A few children were. And it wasn't naughty, wouldn't say boo to a goose so quiet, but if a teacher asked me a question, I wouldn't even know he'd asked me. It'd take a while to wake up from the daydream, and I wouldn't be able to answer because I didn't even know the question. They get offended, well they used to, because it's why weren't you listening to me? You should concentrate. But I just couldn't. I was bored, so I daydreamed. But, I'm quite grateful because at least it gave me the space to daydream. Classrooms. At home, I might be watching TV or something, but I was really daydreaming there. And, and it's not, neither is it a, test of intelligence whether you can concentrate or not. I loved reading books at home. I regurgitated those textbooks. Knew it was bullshit in the classroom, so I was so bored. And, I got the grades because all it is memorizing facts. So it wasn't me daydreaming in the classroom made no difference to my sense of achievements in school, how they celebrate it at all. So why aren't children just allowed to daydream? Why aren't adults allowing themselves to daydream? And how beneficial is it for us to embrace being bored? You can see it in queues for anything. If you're in a theme park queuing sometimes for an hour for a ride, people get a bit frustrated when they look on their phones, or waiting for anything. If the queue takes longer than they thought it would take, people get a bit anxious, frantic, impatient. Why? This is the perfect time to be bored. Queue can be seen as a blessing in that way. I queued for 3 hours in Madeira for this basket ride, and the others I knew were oh, there's no way I'm going to queue for 3 hours. It's well, what else are you doing? You're sitting by the pool on your phone. Why don't you queue? Maybe who knows who you could meet in that 3 hour queue? You can literally just stand there and be bored. And so what's happening with our minds, our brains, our energies when we go into that place of boredom? Boredom is, I guess, the word of resisting being in a relaxed state. I don't want to be bored, or but really, I guess the way I'm interpreting it and weaving it into this video is just being in a state where you're not asleep, but you're not doing anything else either. You're not worrying. You're allowing your mind to daydream. What happens when we're daydreaming? We're imagining. We're really using our imagination. And when we use our imagination, we create our worlds. Whether it's fixed in this reality or in our mind, it does not matter. But we are the creators. And so why is that phase being so scolded and looked upon in the world of work or in schools? And even just in homes, people get very busy in their homes. They don't like sitting doing nothing. Sometimes they feel guilty about doing nothing, or is it too lazy or idle? Whereas really, if you're instead sort of watching TV or on your phone, you're not going into those really super beneficial states of mind. Now, when we're bored and you're not going into that place of worry or anxiety, and instead tapping into sort of infinite creation and imagination, you are said to be, in scientific terms, what they can measure as a brainwave, as being in sort of more of a theta alpha state of mind. Both of them are different. Theta is said to be the main operating sort of mode of children up to the age of 7. It is it's a hypnotic mode, so you're very sort of absorbent, you're very sort of programmable when you're in theta. It's so if you have a warm and loving environment when you're growing up to the age of 7, your theta download will then mirror for the rest of your life a warm and loving reality. And if you have a cold upbringing up to the age of 7, your reality after that will mirror coldness in all its forms, unless you learn as an adult to re-access those theta wavelengths, those ways of absorbing, taking in information about how the world works, unless you enter that as an adult and reprogram it. So, but that's why lots of adults struggle to reprogram their realities out of what their childhoods look like. Because we're so not used to tapping into theta ways of being. It's said to be the brainwave that we use during sleep, meditation. If many people can't, if meditation is just another way of being bored. But if you're bored and you're not at peace, you're worrying, then you're not in theta. You're still in what is the primary mode in the modern world, beta brainwaves. Now, science calls these brainwaves, the modes, the theta, the delta, the gamma, alpha. They've given them labels because they can measure them, and it's basically just the way electromagnetically neurons are reacting to the stimulus of certain behaviours and things going on in their life. That's the way they describe it. But from a spiritual point of view, those brainwaves could also be seen in frequency terms. So theta, for instance, the more of the top end of the imaginative state, almost the psychic state, where you can tap into sort of the 0 point field. Many, I guess, normal people aren't quite able to access it just because of lack of practice and belief. That is a very high, fast, quick frequency. So when I, for instance, drive home with no radio or entertainment at all, that's why it goes so quickly. Time changes. I'm in a very blissful state. Whereas if you try and distract yourself with music or entertainment, which is usually on that lower frequency state, slow, dense, time goes really slow. It matches that frequency. It's so interesting. And the same thing happens in a queue. If you're in a queue and you're looking at your phone, time will go slower than if you tap into those blissful, peaceful, imaginative states. You can go into other worlds. Time flies. All of a sudden you're ahead of the queue, and that's why queuing can be such a gift. But we're programmed to just really, really resist waiting or doing nothing. Why is that? So, the beta state of mind is now, predominantly the modern dominant mode of being. It concentrates work. I've got to do that. I've got to do that. I've got to cook dinner. I've got to go and get that shopping. I've got to write my journal. I've got to go and meditate somewhere. I've got to go to my yoga class. It's that constantly. It's the chatter. All a list of things you've got to do. And if we look at, I guess, what an sort of ideal mode a human would be in, using an example of an indigenous tribe. Now, I'm not saying we have to be indigenous tribes, but they were generally more in tune and harmonic with the environment around them than, say, those who are experiencing civilizations are. So they would mainly be fluctuating, dipping in and out of theta, alpha. Alpha state of being, the brainwaves, is watching a movie, sitting by the fire, having conversations with friends, contemplating the stars. It's the mode where it's the primary mode from the age of 7, which should be then go on throughout adulthood, which is quite a relaxed, peaceful state. Foraging would be alpha. It's not stressful. You'd be picking up, I don't know, the potatoes or the carrots, with laughing with friends as you do. It's quite relaxing. You don't need to hyper focus on the way you tug the carrot up, for instance. Those kind of tasks are alpha, relaxed, but sort of less of daydream mode than the theta one. You're sort of in between a little bit. You're just in reality but not hyper focused on it. Beta is the hyper focus on physical reality. So an indigenous tribe member, for instance, would need to only go into that brainwave when acutely, and that's during a fight or flight sort of episode. That could be during a hunt, so there might be short, sharp, fast movements they need to be aware of and very hyper focused on, or if there's something scary about survival, like not walking into a tree or whatever, not falling off a branch, all of that kind of fight or flight stuff. That's when we're meant to dip into that beta mode, and it helps our physical body survive in that moment. A zebra would be running away from a lion, but that zebra does not remain in beta mode for the rest of the day. She shakes herself off and then goes back into the other brain waves, eating grass, relaxing, alpha, and probably theta too. So I guess the problem with the modern society is that we are operating in that beta dense vibration constantly, and kids are also being taught to do this. They're being taught to concentrate for 6-7 hours a day on different tasks, and they're told that the more you can concentrate, the more you pay attention, the more you can hyper focus on the textbook, the more gold stars you'll receive as an adult, and so you can buy shit you don't need, and whereas those who are using their imagination, they are learning essentially how to create their own reality. Those who are primarily in beta mode are having their reality dictated for them. They're hyper-focused on the information that is already there as the collective. So they're not using, I guess, the highest potential of consciousness in a human being because of their fixation on what we call the physical world, which is essentially information, I guess, collectively others have planted, and we're just receiving that, and then on that lower vibration we have no ability to affect it with our thoughts or create, I guess, a more peaceful, blissful reality of our own. Now, things are changing now, and this is what this time period is about, because there are 3 major timelines, whether you're going to remain being in basically, so the beta state of mind is going to be the 3rd dimension. You're going to remain in that 3rd dimension, which will eventually burn out because it is just too, it's separated from those higher frequencies of consciousness, isn't it? That's what that sort of brainwave does. And so we can label that as the 3rd dimension, And the fourth dimension will be alpha wavelengths, the leisurely, the communities forming and having slower paces of life, but still, mainly operating in physical reality. And then we've got the fifth dimension. All of these have forked already, these timelines. And whether we go down them is based on our attention and the way we're using our mind and our frequency. And the fifth dimension is more about sort of like interconnectedness. You can still, no one remains at the same frequency all of the time. As you see, we can, all humans, depending on what they're doing, their activity, can dip into lots of, the different ones, dial into like different channels essentially. But the fifth dimensional one is more related to the brain waves of theta and delta. Delta is that mysterious place we go to when we're sleeping, or where the intuitives can potentially access information from other realms. So, wow, that's why it's so good to be bored. Why are we sort of addicted sometimes to being busy? And if you're on the phone, you're going to constantly be in the beta frame of mind, whatever you're doing on the phone, whatever kind of content that you're listening to, because you're not bored and you're not daydreaming. I think it's essential for children to learn how to do this. I think sometimes why they're hyperactive is because they're reacting against being told that they have to concentrate too much and they need to expend their energy somehow. But really, if they're just allowed to daydream, they'd balance out. And and the other brainwave is, which is an interesting one, is labelled as gamma. And this is kind of like more of a rare brainwave that humans can sometimes access, sometimes not. They say high achievers can go into gamma mode more so than low achievers, whatever that means. So if we use the example of an athlete, top athlete, they, they're on the track, on the blocks, they're going to be going into like the peak kind of performance mode, and that's gamma. If we think of an artist who has stepped away from the canvas and all of a sudden is flooded with this, amazing idea, and it's just like painting with no real thought behind it, no planning, it's just coming out. And often the best ideas or inventions or art flow through in that way. There's no writer's block or resistance. They're very, very fast because you're operating on a higher frequency, which is the imaginative, creative realm. When you're on those beta, lower frequencies that all of us operate on to concentrate on tasks, that's when people would say it would get something like writer's block. It's just like it's like writing a sentence feels like they're sludging through like thick mud. Just doesn't work if you're on that fight or flight frequency, because you're meant to be is too hyper focused rather than taking in the bigger picture of everything. So gamma we basically enter gamma whenever we're excited or passionate about something. So if we're really keen on what we're doing, we think that our work matters and we're really embodying that, and we've found our mission in life, we can be operating in gamma mode quite often. And that's why you find a person who has a purpose usually is very mentally and emotionally balanced, because they're entering gamma and they're following their excitement about what they want to do and who they want to be. Whereas if you've got someone who seems to be the majority of people right now, and the planet has been the case for eons, where they're sort of doing tasks in exchange for like a financial reward, they're never going to be entering gamma then if they're not super excited about what they're doing, and it's not really truly their purpose, because their job could just be fulfilled by another body after they leave. So the workplaces and schools aren't encouraging the pricelessness of being bored, because that is where we know ourselves, we find ourselves, we have the best ideas. That's when they come in. And the best ideas, they say, comes in when you're in the bath. It's got nothing to do with the bath or the bubbles or the water. It's got everything to do with, well, that's usually a place where you're sitting down and you're not getting bombarded with entertainment or distractions. Unless you've got your phone in your bath, then you're not going to get the ideas. And or if you're walking in nature, you're probably not constantly on your phone there, and you're just sort of walking around. The trees are there. You enter into this like almost automatic, relaxed state, and ideas come in. And that's why it's so good to be bored. And how we can see the gift in being in a traffic jam and not feel rage about it. Really, that rage is, I think, the person who's feeling that doesn't want to sit still, doesn't want to be with their thoughts, because I think if they're not distracted by something, if they're not listening to music or watching the TV or looking at their phone or being busy, then maybe they have some uncomfortable emotions and thoughts that they just can't deal with. They're looking at the outside world to kind of fulfill them. Whereas when we shake off those worries and remember what it feels like to just be in that classroom, daydreaming, being a rebel and daydreaming, not listening to a word in the outside world, time flew, and it's a peaceful place. And you could have, it's not like when you sleep and you dream and it's almost like the dream is like a movie happening to you. When you daydream, you enter that sort of mode, but you have control as the creator over what you're imagining. And the more we exercise that muscle of daydreaming, of being bored, the more that reflects in our reality. Like whatever we imagine then becomes our reality. The more we imagine it, the more we can use that as a tool to create our most ideal reality. Was it Einstein that said imagination is everything? He knew it, He probably got his downloads from being bored. It's not the person who has got a book in front of their face constantly reading. It's good to get other ideas. It's good to sometimes have entertainment and dip into those other modes. But equally as important is being bored and not being scared or feeling guilty about being idle, about not worrying about if you don't do anything, it's as if life will stop or slow down and you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to get somewhere faster and better by being bored than you are being hyper-focused in that fight or flight beta brainwave length. So, yeah, here's to the cues.